thank you, audio and visual crew, for getting that together. The next thing on our agenda today is Ottawa Towers Phoenix Center settlement agreement.
Yes, Mr. President, and we have two agenda items related to this. As you well know, that the council did approve the both the local settlement and the purchase agreement and authorized me to sign closing documents. We are well on the way to doing that. In addition to the fact, part of the agreement was that the city would put $7 million in escrow and non-refundable. That has been done. That was reported to you earlier. So the city is well in progress. We have also begun the bank's requirements that we sign the letters of credit. I have done that today, and we are waiting the final papers from the title company. The one thing that we have requested, and that's why we're here today, in accordance with the Dearborn Capital, our equity partners, and the negotiations that have been going on, is that there is a ground lease agreement that is a little stronger and has a little bit more detail worked in it than the generic ground lease agreement, which was originally included in the documents that you authorized me to sign. So we're bringing this back to you, and I'm going to have Matt go through it. You each had received the new agreement, so we want to explain why this is preferable and why we have put the resolution here recommending that this be agreed to and included with the other documents that you've authorized me to sign on behalf of the city. Mr. Gibb will do the first presentation. Mr. George Contes, also a real estate attorney who's representing the city, has been involved in the negotiations. He is also here to walk you through this and help you with any questions. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council President, could I have authorization to share my screen?
It should work for you now.
So, to follow up on the mayor and to just provide a continuing update as to where things stand right now. As all of you are aware, and as the mayor has indicated, the original process was to close this matter on January 4. That was extended to February 3rd and then extended again. And the final date to complete all of the necessary transactions to completely close the global settlement is February 26th, which is Friday. 2 weeks ago, we brought forth the issue to the council of the request by our equity partner, Dearborn Capital, to have a resolution that would specifically authorize the parking lease agreement, as there was a question as to whether it was fully authorized by the prior agreement approval on November 17th and on November 21st. So real quickly, where are we at? What's been done? So we approved the agreement back on November 17th. The city did make its 2020 settlement payment from the general fund. That's the settlement payment that was agreed in the November 2018 settlement. All of those sums are incorporated into the global settlement. So that payment was not only a payment that was due on November 1st of 2020, but was also included in the global settlement, and you'll see in a second was a total credit to the purchase price. At the same time, the $7 million that this council had set aside was deposited into the escrow. According to the agreements that were approved by resolution, that's a non-refundable escrow account to be used towards all of the closing costs and the settlement costs in the global settlement with Mr. Stevens in North Bay. Since that time, we also, as the council is aware, proceeded to purchase the Purdue School. That is a clear part of the purchase agreement, or the global settlement agreement, and that $600,000 was released from the escrow to accomplish that. We did, as a result of, as we indicated in the last two meetings, a result of reducing some of the obligations at closing, was releasing $3.2 million of the non-refundable escrow under the global settlement agreement to continue to pursue those tasks that are required for closing. So that leaves us, right now, there's $3.2 million of the original $7 million non-refundable escrow. What does that look like for us right now? The original settlement amount was 19.9, but if we subtract those amounts that I just described, there's a balance due on the global settlement of $15.4 million. Indicating to the note to the right, so on February 26th, this Friday, to close the global settlement and all of the transactions therein, there needs to be cash at closing or credit at closing of $9.8 million. We have $3.2 million in the escrow account. We are fully prepared because of the release of the 3.2 and the fact that Dearborn Capital paid an additional $50,000 to Mr. Stevens to negotiate the month of February as an additional extension that allowed us to remove the closing task of financing through a co-borrower loan. They are bringing cash to the table of $7.4 million. Recall that the global settlement does include for the balance of that 15.4 to be paid starting in 2022. So on Friday, we have to be prepared as a city to close the global settlement. That's our obligation with $9.8 million plus the closing costs that will be included in those agreements. So you notice that the 7.4, it's very easy math. When you add it to the 3.2 and the 5.6 that's reserved, it's more than we need. This is $800,000 more than we need. As all of you were made aware back in November and earlier when we were working through the global settlement and the sale and purchase agreement with Dearborn Capital, the city did this on purpose, knowing that there would be closing costs, planning for any variations in transfers or what might happen at a traditional closing of this nature. And so the good news and what was anticipated is as long as Dearborn Capital brings their $7.4 million, which right now they're prepared to do on Friday, then the city is bringing no cash to the closing. So we will essentially be acting as a credit. And so what they call seller's proceeds, which we're the seller at that point, then we would be getting a credit or a check back out of the escrow account at closing on Friday. Mr. Contis has been working very closely with Seaver Title and has been working very closely with multiple attorneys. You can all imagine that there's two of us working on behalf of the city with the support of others, but there are multiple attorneys for Mr. Stevens, there's multiple attorneys for Dearborn Capital and their partners. Too many attorneys, but we're all working very hard. So the good news is we have set aside the money that the city needs to close, but it can't close without the $7.4 million, which they're bringing. So all of that's coming to a head in 3 days. So what documents have been authorized and are in process or have been done that will be executed either this week or on Friday? The discharge of all of the easements granting parking rights has been very critical. It was important to this council, important to the mayor, certainly important to us as council that the original easements that were created by General Motors that resulted in Mr. Stevens being able to maintain the lawsuit will be discharged in their entirety. So all of those easements will go away. They will be discharged as of the closing date on Friday. We are using a letter of credit as security for the settlement financing. So as we described multiple times, that $5.6 million, which is the balance that would be due starting in 2022, that's secured not by the city hall or by other real estate, but by the city's own good credit and standing. And our bank PNC has been excellent to work with on that. And so that would be in place as security for that financing. We have to, of course, make sure that the resolution for the November 2018 settlement or resolution of that agreement is completed. That is the ultimate goal here, is to have this global settlement close so that the impact of the November 2018 settlement will be mitigated, will be eased from the city, and so we won't be facing all those burdens that all of us have talked about for so long. There is an assignment of the leases and the contracts and the bill of sale and the traditional closing, the acceptance and the conveyance of title to the towers and to the grassy lot and to the ancillary small parcels that are all included in those agreements, a release of the escrow money and the payment of closing costs. So all of those are the traditional documents authorized by your prior resolutions, and all of those some have been done, are in the works. So what's left right now is the parking lease. What has came to you 2 weeks ago was a request from our lender. You'll recall that originally Dearborn Capital's affiliated equity fund called T2 was going to issue the funds to allow us to close in January. They were lined up to do that on February 3rd. They decided to change gears when the lawsuit was presented that's currently pending by Pro Tem and others, but it was to our good benefit as we continue to pound and negotiate this. At that time, it was requested that there needed to be a resolution that definitively authorized parking. As I say at the bottom of this slide, without parking, that our partner can't close because they won't close on the towers without knowing they have definitive parking, much like we won't close without knowing that we've fully assigned a liability to them for the garage. And that is the basis of consideration. So what's in the parking lease? Our partner is granted a 20-year lease term with the option to renew, that there would be a 100-year agreement. It's been asked, well, can't the city get out of the lease at some point? The parking is critical to those two towers, and therefore it would be completely within their control. The city does have very strong language in the lease that if there's a default of their obligations of maintenance and repair and operation, if there's a default in their payment of invoicing and utilities and all those types of things, on a 90-day notice, the city would have the ability, if they fail to cure that, terminate the lease in its entirety. So there's strong language in the lease that protects the city in the event that this partner does not do as they're prescribed in the lease itself. Our partner does accept the garage as is, but most importantly becomes responsible for all necessary maintenance and operations. We put at the end of the lease, George and I did a very specific schedule of maintenance and a schedule of operations. Our partner and those before, those that they're working with, wanted to strip out that language that was very specific. We have insisted and negotiated very hard that the city would have, or that the partner would have specific responsibilities for maintenance, repair, and operation. That is tied to the commercial use of the garage, meaning any part of this facility that is open to the public, accessible or otherwise, must be up to date with proper repair and maintenance. There's very strong language regarding the ability to pursue code violations, and all of that has been fully placed in the lease. Our partner is going to maintain in the operate the garage in accordance with those standards, but we also are basing that on comparable facilities. We know that this facility is in very much a state of disrepair, but we've made very strong language that these operational standards are such that hiring practices, maintenance of an operational annual plan, the best practices in the way that customer service is handled, a variety of things that are set forth in Schedule 2B are all in accord with what the best facilities within Southeast Michigan operate, so that this facility will be treated and maintained by our partner in the same way as anyone would expect any garage. Our partner is going to maintain insurance on the garage and its liability. It's a significant section of the lease that talks about insurance and liability. We likewise will continue our own insurance because we'll be operating at some point the plaza and the amphitheater. That insurance obligation for the city is going to be the same way that we insure all of our public assets, so there's no additional insurance or charge to the city, but there is significant language for our partner. There has been some questions about when repairs and maintenance will start. That started this week. They have been meeting every day this week with Michael Stevens, the son of the current owner, part of the global settlement. They've been transferring operational scale. They've been building towards transfer those authorities and discussing all of the maintenance and the other operations. There's some specific things that we've built into the agreement. We were very concerned about the safety and the lighting on Orchard Lake that goes under the garage. That is a specific obligation within 6 months. There's also obligations to provide temporary power for the facility, temporary power for the plaza and amphitheater, as well as access, knowing that the elevators will have to be a scheduled project. There's significant more language within the lease, and I can answer questions going forward. So what's before you tonight is the resolution. We advised the mayor early on that if this was a more generic lease document, that the mayor was authorized in the November 17th authorization and 21st authorization for the Dearborn agreement to go ahead and execute that lease. Given much more consideration and the fact that We have added very, very specific and hard language binding this partner to specific necessary maintenance, repair, and operation. They've pushed back on a lot of things, meaning they have the ability to come to us and seek alteration or modification of the garage and go through the normal process of approval and consent. They've pushed back on certain things. It has been a very solid dialogue. They're ready to be a very significant partner to the city going forward. To be able to close, they are rightfully asking that the council authorize a resolution that would authorize the mayor to include this document and the execution of this document at the closing on February 26th. And so the resolution is before you tonight to do that. So Council President, that's my presentation. I am available to answer questions. George Contis is on as well to answer any questions about anything specific with this parking lease and the ramifications of that. And with that, I will tender it back to you, sir.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Attorney Sharp, and then I'll go to the rest of my colleagues.
Okay, I'm not going to dive into the lease as of yet, but I have a question to Attorney Gibbs. So my question to you is, number one, is it even possible for council to make potential changes to this lease at this late date?
It's not impossible. It's unlikely because of the amount of scale that would have to go into it. It was much more a possibility when we brought this 2 weeks ago, but it's not impossible, Attorney Sharp, but it's unlikely. There has been a couple of suggestions. I would note to council that you all will recall, and Ms. Shramsky, you'll recall this specifically, that there is a section in the purchase agreement that is still binding and is still subject to negotiation and completion, and that's the public-private partnership agreement that would be pursuant to a memorandum of understanding that would be how the operations between the plaza, the amphitheater, and the garage would work once those facilities get back online and move forward. That document has started, as was stated in the purchase agreement, but has not been completed. It was anticipated not to be completed by closing when we thought it was January 4th. Parking agreement is limited to the assignment of responsibility for repair and maintenance and the preservation of rights to parking for commercial purposes. And so the long-winded answer, I apologize, Attorney Sharp. If there was a requested change, it could be asked, but it would be very difficult at this point to modify the document.
Okay, and with that, let me just explain, let me just say to council, and this is just going to be my little couple of minutes, is that, you know, I have serious problems with how this entire Phoenix Center deal has been handled, and as a professional, it's actually quite insulting, because you mentioned that it was brought 2 weeks ago. Well, they got the documents that would be council at the last minute. And so the problem here is that council is always asked at the last minute to accept something. And I've sent several emails, which council is aware of, because council was a part of those emails in which I asked several questions. And each time, each email, I received the same response, which is basically, in the event the council doesn't pass the resolution, then you can't close and you'll go back to court. Well, that's obvious. But the problem I have with that is that council really is being disrespected because they're the legislators here. They've been elected citizens of Pontiac to provide their respective input. And I get that this is a legal matter, but at the same time, when it comes to agreements, council represents the people of Pontiac. They need to provide input. You and I, Attorney Contis, we're to make things legal and make them correct. But in terms of taking ideas, there's nothing wrong with obviously collaboration and discussion. They are never afforded that same opportunity in terms of providing that. And again, to say, last week they were given the documents and they could have given the information at that time, that's just ridiculous because they didn't have time to do it. And I'm going to go back to, again, before you get to the lease agreement, I'm going to go back to the agreement of sale and purchase. And again, I have asked a couple of times about, I get that these provisions removing the co-borrowing in the land contract That's great. We're on the same page with that. I think that's a wonderful thing. However, I still can't get past how you don't have new documents that have to go in front of council for approval, or at least be presented to them, because the agreement of sale and purchase is also included in the global settlement. And so when you go to page 2 of that, which is the purchase price and all the terms, all of that references the land contract and the co-burn, which doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so that's out. Then when you go to the commissions page, the commission also references in terms of the breakdown, in terms of the fees. And so with that, the commission represents 4% of the purchase price, which is assigned to the following. Seller shall pay 2.9% and purchaser shall pay 1.1% of the 4% total commission upon satisfaction of the land contract. Well, guess what? That has been changed. Then when you go to the last page with miscellaneous, number 11, section B, no oral modification. No modification or amendment of this agreement shall be of any force or effect unless made in writing and executed by both purchaser and seller. So how can you say, even if that's so, these are great amendments, how can you say that you still don't have to have a document evidencing these changes? And even though it's a cash deal, it just, I can't fathom that. But nevertheless, I cannot, in my professional opinion, give a thumbs up to something that is basically forced when council basically, even after a week, they can't make modifications to this. They can't give input to that. And then the schedule that I requested some information about the memorandum that's going to be sent to the Oakland County Register of Deeds. You sent something to me, but it wasn't in the packet for council to approve. None of the exhibits were attached to that for them to approve. And so that's what I mean about sliding them to with the information. They're relying on your statements, but a lot of the information is not there for them to visually see and pass, and it has been changed. In addition to the fact, in terms of the schedule, you said 2022, but when I look on the promissory note, it appears to me, unless I'm reading this incorrectly, that the payments are supposed to start in February of this year, the $83,000. Okay, so has council gotten a budget amendment for that in terms of going forward and putting this in their new budget in terms of these payments? Because I thought initially it was 2022, but the promissory note says it starts this year, this month. And then the schedule of services of contract is Exhibit D, with all of these extra contracts that I would assume some of these responsibilities are going to be the cities. That's going to be a cost. Detroit Elevator, my understanding, the elevator is going to be the responsibility of the city. Is that correct?
No, the elevator in the lease agreement and the way that it's put together is a proportional cost between the parties that would be shared. The contracts that you're referencing that would be assigned, as I said earlier, there's going to be a large series of assignment of those contracts that would pass not from Stevens and North Bay Drywall to the city, but directly to Dearborn Capital and their assigns. And so those contracts would pass through the city. The city will take on a maintenance obligation of the plaza and the amphitheaters. I mean, there's some maintenance that's part of that. DPW is aware of that. Those contracts would pass through. And as to the promissory note, the form boilerplate note that was originally attached to the global settlement agreement, and what traditionally happens in these larger commercial deals is they'll attach a note in form. The global settlement agreement, as well as the letter of intent and all the communication and correspondence at all times maintained 2022. February of 2022 is the commencement date. Counsel for Mr. Stevens and I recognized that boilerplate form note had been attached to the global settlement agreement as we approached to prepare closing documents, indicated that it was incorrect and clarified that as part of our preparation for closing. But that doesn't amend the agreement. That's a boilerplate form, much like the memorandum of lease that you're talking about is very much a boilerplate form. that,
So this is exhibit B2, form of promissory note. So you're saying that this is basically invalid because it states at the bottom the payments on the 4th day of February 2021 and on the 4th day of each calendar month. So you're saying
Yeah,
this is not correct?
yeah, the body of the agreement itself calls out that it would be February 2022 as well as the letter of intent that would go with that. And so when the attachment was attached to the global settlement agreement, it was attached as a form of document. And I'm sure Mr. Contis, and he's got about 30 years of experience like I do in commercial real estate transactions, would concur that when you attach those documents, they're referenced in the agreement as it would be in the form of the document attached, and you finalize those documents as you approach your closing. In this case, that form document that was attached by Mr. Salen to the global settlement agreement, because again, it was a document that they originally drafted. When it was acknowledged that the body of the agreement was 2022, that our closing process was confirmed to be that the note would be 2022, as the body of the agreement states, which would be controlled.
I guess it's just kind of, I would think that all the documents would be consistent because again, I don't know how you attach that and say that that's not really correct when you have the proper parties and the dates and so forth and the amount. And you're saying to me it's a year, this is supposed to be for next year and not for the current year. I'm not necessarily sure, but that's just my feel on it. And I think council needs to consider, based on also the prior agenda item and that discussion with the last minute, I think council really needs to consider going forward of trying to do something and putting something in place in form of a resolution that the administration needs to present time-sensitive documents to council at least 30 days in advance for council to deal with it and have time to digest it and ask questions and go back and forth because this is just not right in any form or fashion. But I will commend council on their stamina in terms of getting to this point. Because again, you have to take credit for putting the $7 million aside in order to even do this deal and standing firm with even not taking in when the $20 billion in bonds and realizing that there was a better way to go. And it's when you use consensus and collaboration that you can get to that point. And so I just want council to just embrace that and go forward with being able to do what they need to do. Thank you.
And just in brief response, I want to join in the congratulations to council. You know, when this city was faced with default of the 2018 agreement on November 1st, and we were able to work with this council to get to a global settlement that avoided that default by November 17th, it was through the hard work of this council and others. And so I agree with Attorney Sharp that all of you need to be commended. And we have had to work fast. We weren't anticipating that there would be a lawsuit that purports certain things. We weren't anticipating that there would be what's going on in public that forced the change of this transaction. It forced Dearborn Capital to contribute an additional $50,000 of its own money to help hold this together in light of all of that. And then it triggered the lease. When it triggered this more substantive, more direct lease, because we weren't securing this matter with the land contract and other things, we had to make sure that we were securing and protecting the city from the liabilities and exposure of that garage facility, knowing how much in disrepair it is. When all of that happened, a huge effort was lifted to get this lease done, and the council got it within an hour when it was completed. And so I do apologize to council that we couldn't go any faster for you. But you worked really, really hard within the timeframes that all of us have been given. The mayor, myself, council president, we all have worked really hard to bring this to fruition. And so I agree with Attorney Sharp. Would it have been easier if we had a few more days? We just didn't have a few more days. All of this started on November 1st. And to your credit, council, you have read the materials and stayed this course. And here we are tonight with this last piece of it.
Okay, thank you. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, just because I don't want to lose my point, and I'm not going to belabor this tonight. In November, at the Saturday meeting, with 4 of my colleagues on there, you were given some assurances to them. They overrode my no vote in order to vote for this agreement. And my major sticking point was the 100 years in the agreement. And you told Councilwoman Shansky and others that it could be changed at that time. We are 5 months later, and the 100 years are still in the agreement. I only asked for 2 amendments to be made to this document. One was for this agreement to be being able to be modified by the council to make sure that the lease was looked through, even though we have to close on Friday. That was the first amendment. And the second amendment I asked for was for the city to have a reasonable buyback after that 20 years if it's not working, so we don't put these future decisions on other councils and other mayors going forward. The reason that we're in this condition is because the agreement with General Motors gave them easement rights in perpetuity, and we are just doing the same thing today. So I'm gonna turn it over to my colleagues, but I just wanted everybody to know that I asked for those 2 changes to be made. They're not made, so I will be putting a no today on the next agenda item. Pro Tem Carter?
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me make sure. I've been listening diligently, and I keep overhearing the fact that the council approved a document. It's blatant BS, I'm gonna say it, because when the council approved it was back in August. There hasn't been any other council improvement. So whenever the mayor and they speak about that, just like the Phoenix Center, is it gonna be collateral for Dearborn? Nobody answered that one. We asked about it. We asked about the LOC, nothing. We asked about, you did, to get rid of the $10 termination for the parking. We didn't want nothing to have to do with the Michigan Regional, or if anybody knows what the regional authority was, they have the ability to put taxes and bonds up on the citizens of Pontiac. That was not in there until the other week. We scrapped that back in June of last year. Mr. Gibbs hasn't explained what this concession compensation is yet. I mean, and all of a sudden, the Pontiac investment property just popped up the same time as the Phoenix Rise, and whatever the Phoenix Other Investment LLC popped in. They didn't exist back in August or October or November. There's no documents that we've been handed that has been complete. We got all these exhibits that have been missing, and everybody just skating over this right here. Need to go ahead and scrap this. They purposely last week failed to make it public. So the clerk did not have the documents that Matt Gibb and them sent to the council members. Yeah, it was mailed to our house, but the documents in the house were modified from the documents we received as an email. So it's corruption and racketeering, and it needs to be made public. Whatever documents they got, there is no client attorney privilege to this. This is a shifting the pans. This council has not yet sent a complete package, and they have failed by bringing things up at the last minute. And yes, I do have a conflict of interest, but I will explain it. Yes, I will be voting no matter what. And the lawsuit has been filed again. So you can check the court explorer and you'll find a new one there. And enjoy it. I want everybody to enjoy it. Exactly what's getting ready to happen. You are not going to pump the people of Pontiac. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, anybody else from the council?
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Councilwoman Gibbs.
Mr. Gibb, it is in the packet that you sent to us, but I don't know that people would have looked at it. Can you explain, because Council Pro Tem brought up the Phoenix Rising, can you explain the Phoenix Rising LLC and why this is a new entity?
So, in every commercial transaction for commercial property, of which the Ottawa Towers is, so Dearborn Capital Partners is the investment firm that's bringing to the closing $7.4 million that allows us to close on the 26th, the global summit. In every commercial transaction, any investment firm, any development firm, whether it's some that are here, you know, whether it's a development firm that's in our own community, will use what they call a single purpose entity to be the legal entity that completes the transaction. And so what Dearborn Capital has done, and we were fully aware of it, Mr. Contis and I were fully aware of it, they have formed Phoenix Rising Pontiac LLC. We've confirmed with their attorney, Mr. Freeman, had him confirm again in writing to us today that is a wholly owned single purpose entity of Dearborn Capital. So under the law, it's one and the same. And the reason you do that is because Dearborn Capital has investments in, as we indicated before, close to $400 million of these types of investments. And you want all of the liabilities. So say the sprinkler contractor decides to sue, that they would sue Phoenix Rising Plaza LLC, and they wouldn't sue all of Dearborn's corporate assets across the country. This is a very standard 100-year plus practice in America and Michigan, and they've done it here too. So I can assure council that Phoenix Rising Pontiac LLC is a wholly owned entity solely by Dearborn Capital Partners, but it's for that specific purpose, and it has been in every transaction I've ever done in my 30 years of doing this work, because that is the mechanism of which these transactions are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. President. I'm
So
sorry.
I want to recognize everybody, and then I'll come back to you, Pro Tem.
Right, sir.
Okay. Any other council member?
Yes, because it
Go ahead,
seems to be a sticking point for the council, and it also seems to be a question from citizens. Is there any way to decrease the length of that lease?
Well, we can decrease it, but because the parking is an integral part of the towers themselves, that if the city were to take a unilateral position to say, we want a clause that says the city could terminate the lease, then they would essentially be terminating parking rights to the towers, which is the exact scenario that we were in that caused the lawsuit. The difference is, Ms. Shramsky, is those rights were conveyed by easements, meaning the city had the responsibility to provide the parking, maintain the parking, a much different scenario. What we're trying to accomplish here is, even though it's a long-term obligation, is we're also assigning all of the obligation for the repair, restoration, maintenance, operation of all of that. If at any time that goes sideways, the city would have the ability to immediately terminate and shorten that term. So it might not seem like a strong hammer, but it's an immensely strong hammer. Part of the question would be is why would the city want a shorter lease and not leave it to the commercial responsibility of someone that would own the towers and have the responsibility for the repair? So could we shorten it? We could shorten it a little bit. Would it be shorter than maybe 50 years? It's completely unlikely. The reason for that is because any type of financing that they're going to get privately, which doesn't involve us, to continue to repair and restore all of this, will require that there's a long-term parking commitment that ties directly to the towers. Otherwise, the towers lose their value. And so it's a little bit of a legal answer I'm giving, but it's an important legal answer, because the most significant thing in the lease is, even though it's long, the city is permanently assigning the exposure would have to maintenance and operation of that garage. The city doesn't want to get that back. All the city wants is to be able to utilize the plaza for the public benefit and make sure that that continues to be an asset.
And all liability, correct?
All liability, yeah. The liability for the garage itself goes completely with Dearborn Capital Partners under that lease agreement. So that's why I explained earlier, significant language about insurance. If you read the lease and you read the 4 pages that we put in for liability and insurance, if there is a hazard that's caused within the garage, that goes completely to the liability of the tenant, the lessee, Dearborn Capital in that garage. So the city, it's out of the repair business, out of the parking business, of which it costs $400,000 a year, more importantly, out of the liability business. The exchange for that is it has to be a long-term commitment that the towers will always have access to parking, but that parking is tied to that liability.
Well, I certainly would like to see them have the liability for an eon.
Okay. Any other council person?
Yes, I have one question.
Okay, Councilwoman Miller, then Councilwoman Waterman, then Pro Tem Carter.
Okay, I'm not gonna belabor this, I'm just gonna ask that my citizens in District 5, they can get a copy of this proper lease. This is travesty what I read, and I read it from front to back. I see nothing that the city, as a resident, is gonna get out of this lease for the parking, but just giving away another one out property. It's insulting that not one, even my council president could have been a part of this, and we wouldn't be here today. As was stated earlier, we don't get to be involved in anything with this administration. It's sad that I have to say these things. The sticking point for me
was the 100 years, Council President, yes. But then I noticed, like we do with everything that we have in the city that we have done prior, even with the Amazon project, we didn't put language in there that says that an X number of citizens will be hired from this city. We don't have that in there either. There's so many things I could go on and on.
That's against the law.
Listen, please do not
Did I
interrupt while they're speaking, even
Right,
if
did I
you agree
get
with what they're saying, because the people in
Right.
the audience cannot hear with the extra microphones. So please, while Councilwoman Miller has the floor, please respect her, and I'll make
She
sure.
cuts me off, I'm
Listen,
going to
Councilwoman
continue.
People-
That's against the law. The state ruled that out in 2000.
Oh, my God.
When somebody has the floor, you do not interrupt them, even if you.
You do.
Man. Okay, thank you. You've been muted. I'm trying to conduct this very important meeting for the citizens of Pontiac, and personal ambitions or personal things that have things to do with it, this is not the place for it. I've been recognizing everybody with dignity and class, and we should continue that for the rest of the meeting. Councilwoman Miller has the floor. Please do not interrupt. I will recognize everybody, and if you have a rebuttal or something that you want to say, it's a way to say it with dignity and class, so we can have this meeting go productively. We have citizens watching, taxpayers that have a huge building on the line, and the future of that we need to take seriously.
You don't have to show yourself out.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Miller, you still have the floor.
You know, Council President, I kind of lost my train of thought. All I want to say to my residents in District 5, this is a tragedy, and I will not be voting for it. Actually, I have a problem with the global settlement. That's why I didn't vote for that as well. I explained here the reason why I didn't vote for none of it. To acquire the Purdue School, I went there as a kid. All we received was some trash. That building got so many issues with it. $600,000. Really? I'm so sick and tired of the residents getting rude. And I just thank God that I'm here to vote on this one. I can't speak for no one else, but you know what? I will not do this to my people. I will not. This is a rush deal. You are getting nothing out of it. All I ask you to do is read the settlement agreement yourself and see what you get. There's a lot of things wrong with this agreement. If I had them in a highlighted part, I would be here all night. But I'm just going to say that, and thank you, Council President. I'm done.
Okay, Councilwoman Waterman.
Council, can I have one rebuttal on a question she raised about hiring?
I'll let you go afterward.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Speak for quite a bit of time. Yes, go ahead, Councilwoman Waterman.
Good evening, all, and I've been sitting here, and I understand the dilemma that this council has been presented, and I feel the same as my colleagues. I'm at the point where you get sick and tired of being sick and tired of what is brought before us at the 24th hour. But as it relates to making sure that this does not go on the backs of the citizens, that would be the only reason that I'm looking forward to move. But I agree with you, Councilwoman Miller. I agree with you, President Williams. 100 years to anybody is totally ridiculous. I don't care who you are. And I know none of us will be here, probably none of our kids will be here as this goes on. And it might be that stuff might just get torn down. But to say that I'm very proud of this country, very, very proud, because we stuck to our guns when we put that $7 million out there to say this is what we need to do to help move this agreement forward. We stuck to our ground. We did not falter when it came to that, and we did not falter to make sure that Dearborn Capital comes to this table with some money at hand, cash money at hand, to make this a viable settlement. So in that regard, that would be the only reason that I would sit here to move this in, because I do not want this to fall on the back of our residents. But as I think Councilwoman Miller stated, I want all papers, signed documents presented to this council that is going to be executed at that closing. I want all signed documents to this President.
Okay, any other council persons before I go back to Councilman Carter? Okay, go ahead, Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess this would be probably a good time for the mayor to start answering some questions, since the city is involved with a partnership. I can find nothing that benefits the city in this partnership. It appears the Phoenix and the garage all belong to this other group. This group can, the city owes, matter of fact, another question, Mr. President, if the city responsible for all the vacant parking lots, and is the city being charged per day? I think Mr. Matt Gibbs can probably answer that question. I'll
Okay.
get back to the mayor.
Was the question asked to me or to Mr.
Before I recognize you, Madam Mayor, because I'm going to turn it over, because I don't want to lose all the questions. Attorney Sharp.
I just wanted to bring to light, just a few things because, you know, I, like most of you, have marked this up, and I mean, I think again, you know, with consensus, we could have come with a better contract. I'm not saying that it's bad, but I think that, you know, with consensus, you could have come up with something better in some terms that were a lot more favorable, but nevertheless, just to bring to the light of council attention, you know, there's a provision that says wherever this agreement provides that an act to be taken or performed when approval or consent is to be given by the city, such act may be taken or performed or approval or consent may be given by the mayor or any person designated in writing by the mayor to act in the name of the mayor under this agreement without further action by the city council, and the leasee may rely therein in all respects except as provided in section 1.11D. There's another section, obviously, that allows that if it's by law that council has to approve it, then obviously council has to approve it. But if it's not something that's mandated by law or by charter or something, then the mayor has the authority to act. So I just want to bring to the attention of council, if you guys are good with that, do understand that that provision is in there.
Yeah.
The other question I do have, and then you can speak to it afterwards, really quick, that I think that is kind of important. And this question is to Attorney Gibbs. As it relates to the transfer of the lease, this would be under Article 11, restrictions or transfers. The leasee may, for the period beginning on the commencement date and ending on the 5th anniversary date of the commencement date, transfer any or all of the leasee's interest in the garage to a person or entity with cumulative net worth and liquidity equal or greater than the principal of the leasee as determined by the leasee in its sole discretion and without obtaining the city's prior written consent. So what was the thought process of allowing this transfer to happen within what I assume to be the first, or I interpret to be the first 5 years?
Council President, want me to answer that one now, or wait till
Yes,
the
you
end?
go through all of the answers now, you and then Madam Mayor.
The lessee, Dearborn Capital, had originally asked that there would be an unlimited right to assignment of the lease agreement. And George Contis and I objected strongly to that and indicated that there had to be provisions that protected the city. A transfer that would be within the first 5 years to an equity partner that would be of equal capability would allow the process to have a third-party developer of equal or greater capacity to continue to build this out, move forward. Longer-term transferring rights would be subject to the entirety of the 40-plus page document, including those maintenance and operational standards. That's the clause that was negotiated, and it's somewhat standard.
My thought would be, I mean, I understand not allowing the, to an infinite amount of time in which to transfer, but I would think that you would require them to at least have more than 5 years being in place before they would be allowed to transfer. I mean, within the first year they can transfer this. So within the first 5 years, which are to me the critical and important time frame, they can transfer this and those obligations. And so the time frame, it keeps getting kicked potentially, is what I can envision happening. I'm not saying that it will, but that's always a possibility. Thank you.
Part of what's being structured for the benefit and the protection of the city is in anticipation that there could be invited an additional development partner, because one of the towers has been empty for a significant period of time. And the additional analysis on the garage, we had the repair analysis at $16.8 million. It's now pushing closer to $18 million, which means that there's a significant investment being undertaken by Dearborn Capital agreeing to this lease. And leaving the door open for them to be able to bring in, we all know that Walbridge and Bogie are partnered in the 140 South Saginaw building. To bring in a developer of that scale, there's no ability to negotiate, that they would have to come and ask for permission to bring in someone like that. And that's what that clause is all about. It gives them the ability, so long as it is protective, that the city won't backtrack on the capacity of the party as the lessee, that they would be able to go out and do that. And that's the whole purpose behind it. This is a much significant project. So some of the other questions.
Bringing in is one thing. Bringing in is one thing, transferring is another.
Yeah,
So I can understand the thought process of bringing in, but to allow the transfer, that's completely, that's just different, and that's not really that going along with that thought process.
It's the way the industry works. I mean, every transaction in the city of Detroit, as an example,
I get it.
raised this.
I'm gonna recognize Mr. Contis, had his hand up, trying to get in.
Thank you, Council President. Attorney Sharp, as Mr. Gibb alluded, the reality is, could a transfer occur with respect to the garage? Absolutely. But when would it occur? It would occur if they got to the point that Tower 1 and Tower 2 were fully leased, they were getting rental income, and Dearborn Capital would experience phenomenal growth in value in the property, and they would attempt to sell those towers at that time, and would need to assign the lease. Other than that, I think it's speculative to think that one would go without the other. So,
Well, I think it's always a possibility, though. I mean, that's one scenario which may be true, but there are other possible scenarios that don't have to be as positive as that, because I'm in a situation where I need to get out and I want to transfer, and I got somebody who will come in, and it happens all the time. We see it even with, let's shoot Art Van, Love, now they're under. I mean, it just happens all the time, but I don't want to belabor that point. I just wanted to bring it to the attention of council. Thanks.
So, Council President, a couple other questions that were raised. Councilwoman Miller raised about jobs and hiring. There is, we are restricted from saying that there would be a specific amount of jobs tied to any development, and this council is well aware of that. But what we did put in the operational standards of the lease document, very specific language that where there were opportunities to engage Pontiac-based companies, professionals, or otherwise, that they would be given preference, and that they would utilize local nonprofit resources for the recruitment of particular jobs at the site. They would also seek to afford apprenticeships. And so we did take care to make sure that there was specific language in the lease agreement that required them to prioritize Pontiac businesses and its residents for those types of opportunities. Now, is there the ability under the law to require them to a certain number? There's just not under the law, but there is that provision in that document. Now, this as a long-term agreement is intended to be a mutual partnership. They're very positively excited about getting this lease approved tonight and closing on Friday and commencing this, but that language is in that about prioritizing Pontiac residents and our youth for apprenticeship. The last question I heard was from Council Pro Tem, and I think if I understood it, it was, is the city responsible for other parking lots? And we're not. I'm not aware of any other parking lot.
No. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that again. In the Phoenix Center, there are 2,800 parking spaces.
Correct.
Okay. If there is any reason that they're not filled, is the city responsible for any debt?
Not any debt that would be applied to that, and not any maintenance or repair. The only place where the city would be responsible is when the plaza and the amphitheater becomes operational, and the city would want it to create some other improvement. Council Pro Tem say they wanted to improve an access, then the city could take that on as its own project. The city has no obligation or debt regarding any of those parking spaces. And we put very specifically in Article 6 of the lease that the city maintains an absolute right to be able to use the parking for its purposes going forward. They have a right to charge parking fees. So if we have a concert and they want to charge $5 a car to go to our concert, they can, but we have an absolute right to utilize parking. And the memorandum of understanding that I again re-emphasize that the language of the purchase agreement contemplates that there will be, once all of this becomes operational, a formal public-private partnership agreement that would define all of that, is the opportunity for this council to really engage in that dialogue. This lease agreement is, I understand the last minute nature of it, but this lease agreement was in this very compressed time frame when we were facing default on November 1st until now. And I, again, applaud everybody that this has been almost miraculous that we've been able to negotiate to this point in the positive. I really have a lot of faith that this is an excellent, excellent document for the city.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, I was referring to the questions of the pro tem. I asked a number of them, since you let Attorney Gibb and Attorney Contis speak, have been answered, I believe. One of the questions he did ask was, and the question he put in the chat, let me start with that first. The question he put in the chat, Councilman Carter, was, can they, and I assume by they you mean Dearborn Capital, sell the garage as a security asset? No, they cannot. That's one of the points. The city owns the garage. We maintain ownership. We're just giving them the responsibility to repair, maintain, and operate the parking park. So no, they can't sell anything they don't own. We own it, and that's the great part of this. The other benefits of this deal, which I've called a win-win for the city, it's a win for the citizens because they don't have to bear any undue expense. They do not have to go into a default and just levy or go back to litigation and pay more for that. So it's a win for the citizens in addition to the other benefits of a public-private partnership and the things that, as Matt Gibb has expounded, that we have negotiated as part of the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, which are very important to me, as I said in the town hall, so I won't go into that again. But in addition to that, other benefits for the citizens in the city is that you've heard that they've now extinguished for all time the easement rights. And by easement rights, we're talking about years ago when General Motors was part of the development agreement, that they were given perpetual easement rights that the city had to provide parking in that garage. Perpetual means to the end of time. We forever and ever will not have that obligation. That's what got us into this lawsuit to begin with, when the emergency manager wanted this garage torn down. That is off the backs of the city forever, and that has been a nightmare that we've been in, so we never have to worry about that. In addition to the fact that we have brought in now an equity partner. So for the $7 million that we put into escrow, we not only maintain ownership of the whole garage, and we operate the amphitheater and use it for the purposes that we want. But in addition to that, they are also obligated to do that $17 million of repairs that we never did, all right? Never could afford to do. So with $7 million, we have now turned that into $7 million plus $17 million of repairs that they have to do. So they're into this deal for $24 million. So we have turned the $7 million into $24 million worth of value for the citizens of Pontiac. That also gets us out of the parking business for this garage, which was good because as I look back in the records, when the city was running the parking arrangement, the city lost as much as $400,000 a year. We no longer will have to bear that expense. We will have the authority and the privilege and the fun of using the amphitheater, but we'll no longer be responsible for any maintenance, repairs, operation, supplying personnel to let people out, buying all the turnstiles. None of that is off the back of the citizens for the duration of this arrangement and this lease. In addition to the fact that we have all the advantages of the public-private partnership. And I talked about some of the things we can envision. Now, this is just the start when you have equity partners that come in that have kind of a vision of what this can bring to the city. Those are all benefits to the citizens and amongst others. But I just wanted to summarize some of the most important, most obvious, and that I do believe This is a good deal for the city. I would not have signed it. I would not have brought it to you otherwise. And I'm sure with the additional negotiations that we have carried on, and I must commend Matt Gibb and George Contis. You know, I'm a hard person to please. And I know they spent, I don't know how many hundreds of hours and going through and making sure the details for this were as good as they can negotiate for the city of Pontiac. And several times they came back to me and I said, no, that's not good enough, go back and do more. So they have done that and have brought that something to, I'm proud to bring to the citizens of Pontiac. And I'm proud of the fact that our council, we have collaborated to get this far. I think this is a win for us as elected officials for the citizens of Pontiac.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Any council people have anything else to say before we move on?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Councilwoman. I know.
Okay, since some things were brought up, I wasn't gonna read anything that I highlighted. Just to give the general audience a little bit what's in the contract here. And what some of the items that Attorney Sharp brought up, and reading that, I get what you're saying. We see it a lot in the city of Pontiac. Anyone that lives here knows. I guess it would be transferred or sold within the next 5 years. Probably won't even know who owns it by then. So I wouldn't get that out there. But I want the citizens to hear this. This is regarding the plaza and the amphitheater, which we currently supposed to own. And this is in Article 6, use of the plaza. Provided that the city is not in default of this agreement beyond applicable notice and cure period, and subject to the terms of this agreement, including and without the limitation, the terms of section 6.33 hereof, the city and its representative licenses invited shall have the right to use the garage to the or access to the plaza and amphitheater. Now, this is when it gets good. The city may contract the application of any applicable law or appropriate proceeding. The city shall pay all real estate taxes, assessments applicable to the plaza and amphitheater, okay? The city shall pay the proportionate share of the cost to maintain, repair, or replace the common areas of the garage utilized in connection with the plaza and amphitheater, including, without limitation, means of access thereof. Elevators. That's what, I think that was brought up. There you go, Mr. Gibbs, the elevators. Based on the parties' mutual and reasonable determination of the proportionate use thereof. The city shall, at its sole cost, provide adequate security for the plaza and amphitheater, and shall comply with the reasonable rules and regulations established by the lease with respect to the use and operation of the garage in connection with access to the plaza and amphitheater. So, City of Pontiac, what they're saying is, when we go down, use the amphitheater and the plaza, there's a situation where they're going to charge you, and we still, there are streets, there was a section here, and I can't find that, of course, they're responsible for the road, they take it care of. So don't get it in your head that we don't have money that we have to still put on it. And you got to think about this too as well. We still have the plaza, and we still have the amphitheater. We put all this money into this global agreement. What's going to happen to the, which I think that most citizens talked about, the plaza and amphitheater? Where will we get the money for that? Because we've got a long way on this. This is not a good deal. I implore anyone to read it and digest it in, because I did. It's not a win-win. It's a lose-lose deal for the citizens of Pontiac. And my vote is going to be no. I will live with that the rest of my life, and I'll be glad to ride under it and know that I did the right thing. I have seen too many of these deals in the city of Pontiac. I've been in politics a long time, been in many council meetings over the years. I will not be a part of it. I will not throw my people under the bus. Never will I. There are a lot of other things in here that is provision that the city has to pay. The city has to pay it. If the lease decided, as Attorney Sharp mentioned, that he wants to not pay the insurance, so the city has to take up the insurance and give them allow their time, and then they have to pick the insurance up. There's a lot of ifs in here. There's too many ifs. I bought my house, and I know I would turn this down if I was buying my house. Mr. President, I am done.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 4. Is there a motion to vote on this item?
Mr. President, yeah, please. I do have something to say, but I make a motion that we suspend the rules to vote on this tonight. We have a deadline on Friday, and we cannot afford to increase taxes, which if we go to court, that's what happens.
Is there support?
I support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported to suspend the rules. Roll call? Mr. Clerk, roll call? Is he here?
Yes, I'm here. Waterman,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Turner,
No.
Miller,
No.
Petola,
Yes.
Shramsky,
Yes.
Taylor Burks.
Yes.
5 yeas, 2 nays.
Okay. Is there a motion to vote on item number 4?
So moved
Oh,
on
wait a
item
minute.
number 4.
4.
Okay. Any discussion?
What I said
Seeing
earlier,
none, roll-
Mr. President,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Councilman Bieber.
okay, what I was gonna say earlier is if we go back to court, that means litigation, because this needs to be voted on Friday. If we do not go back, or if we do go back to court, there's a good chance, or if the litigation is not able to get us back to court, where we are going to have increase in property taxes. And that is something we have all said all along, we did not want to happen to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman People. Let me just put this point in. The mayor has been part of this negotiation. Any changes to the Plaza Agreement or conversations is now solely vested in the mayor's power by the clause that was given to her in this negotiation. So when they sat down to the table, they didn't think about the council. They knew they were setting the date for the 26th when they had the decision on the 4th. They could have been working on it then, but instead they waited 2 weeks in order to bring it to the council, and it's still not a complete document. So if you're gonna tell the citizens the truth, tell them the whole truth. So thank you.
I did, thank
All
you.
right, roll call?
Williams,
No.
Turner,
No.
Miller,
No.
Petola,
Yes.
Shramsky,
Yes.
Taylor Burks,
Yes.
Waterman.
Yes.
4 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay, motion passes, which brings us to item number